So Diary of a CEO just had 4 of the best guys in the YouTube space talk about money. And I want to go into Raoul, who's like this crypto specialist, and what he talks about with consensus of money, Bitcoin, and if you should be investing in Bitcoin to become a multimillionaire, cash flow, and then ultimately risk, and sort of what he thinks about it. I wanted to just go into his entire take on the financial space. I'm over here in Tokyo, Japan. And I even want to talk about their aspects around inflation. I got an interesting take around what they talked about around inflation and what that means for everybody moving forward. So I'm here in Tokyo, Japan. I got about 17 days over here. I'm on the last leg of my trip, so I'm pretty excited. I wanted to share this with you is that one of the times, so talking about inflation, actually, they're talking about mugs, right? And they have this mug, and Stephen Bartlett, who I actually recently just saw at a presentation in New York City, I got to see him speak there, poses this question like, okay, I have this mug here, and I've got 3 pieces of paper, and I can sell you this mug for 3 pieces of paper. But if my people give you, 100 pieces of paper each, now I can charge you more. But the thing is that they go through explaining inflation, and they're like, the thing that happens when this occurs is that now those pieces of paper are actually worth less. The value of the mug genuinely is not changing. It's the value of the paper. And as they explain this, I was in Uzbekistan, okay? When I was in Uzbekistan on the business trip, I was there, and their currency is called Som. And you took your $20, American $20, and when you took it over there and exchanged it, you'd get like 300,000 Som. And while we were there, the value kept going up for us, right? So you would exchange it and you get more and more each time because their inflation was so high and their government was just continuously putting more money into circulation, which wasn't doing the Som any favor. So you just have wads and wads of cash in your pocket to then go and try and exchange this, to buy anything at the grocery store. And over time, as we were there, I actually had a clothesline that I purchased, and the clothesline became cheaper as we were there because we were having more and more and more cash. It was absolutely wild. But why I'm explaining this is that Raoul goes into things around Bitcoin and around inflation, but he's also talking about the financial situation just being consensus based. Okay, so any type of money is based on consensus. Okay, and so he's saying like, okay, if you're looking at crypto, you're looking at even gold, something like that, it all comes back to, oh my gosh, there's a Waymo right there. You see the Waymo? I just made a video talking about Waymos in Japan, and I've been seeing them freaking everywhere. I literally just posted this. I uploaded it, and now there's another freaking Waymo out here. Dude, they're everywhere. So another reason why you should be investing in Google. Now, that's wild. When we get back to talking about this now, okay, so he's talking about consensus, and he's talking about how consensus is a key role. And this actually goes into Donald Trump talking about taking away things along the lines of like, should we do quarterly reporting? And it's interesting because it's like, you should do quarterly reporting because it brings more positive consensus to companies. And when you have more positive sentiment around a company, that creates greater consensus on what money is doing. And so the more open we are with how successful companies are, and yes, regulations are bad, but also some regulations are really good, and that's where consensus helps the U.S. economy because there is more affirmation that these companies are in a good space, especially smaller companies or younger companies. Anyway, going back to the discussion here is that Raoul goes on and he's talking through this, and he's like, look, if we have consensus for money, and there's clearly consensus for crypto, okay, so now more and more people are investing in crypto, more and more governments are investing in crypto, more and more companies are investing in crypto, the Wall Street is starting to build on crypto. There's clearly a rising consensus, and we're still at this point where if you have somebody, a younger person, right, where let's say wages go up on a yearly basis 2 to 3%, but the S&P is going up on a yearly basis 10 to 12%, and we're losing to inflation, his whole argument is You look at crypto, it's gone up 1,000% over the last, in the last 10 years, possibly even more than that if I'm doing my math quickly. If you're somebody who has cash flow, okay, so you have cash flow and you can pay your bills, why not just put it in, and you're young, you're under the age of 35 or 40, he's like, put it into Bitcoin and hold it and play the long game. And I think what's interesting is that Jaspreet Singh, Humphrey Wang, these are great guys, great financial guys that I like watching. Humphrey Wang sort of like didn't argue with him as much. Yeah, they talked about the risk, but what was interesting is Jaspreet Singh was going through and he's like, but it's the risk, and what if you just hold it? And it, you've had these 70% drawdowns 3 or 4 times, and the whole point here with Raoul Paul was, his point was, if you have cash flow and you can stomach the drawdowns, okay, so these 70% drawdowns, and you recognize that the only way that you can go forward long term, because housing prices are going up, okay, it's more expensive to live today than ever before. People don't have a lot of money, and putting it into some dividend that gives you a 4% return, you'd have to start at like $300,000. And his whole argument is, he's like, dude, every week you could just put in 15, 20 bucks, and if it goes up 10 to 100% and you're playing a 5 to 10 year game, that pays off way quicker and way better than if you're counting on a dividend stock like McDonald's or Coke to actually come back and help you. And so this whole discussion point came back with Singh, and he was going through, well, I have rental properties, I have real estate, I have a business. And the interesting part here that I wanted to bring up is that Raoul Paul just kept saying, he's like, you've got to hold it for a long time horizon. Time is on your side, you've got to hold it. It's very risky, so you've got to have cash flow, okay? You have to have cash flow. And then over a long period of time, you can do technical investments if you want. But if you have cash flow and if you have time on your side as a younger person, you should be taking this risk. And the interesting part here, there was 2 things, is that he even brought up, he goes, look, it's more risky to be an entrepreneur. Way more risky to be an entrepreneur. Way more entrepreneurs fail than any other space. And then the other aspect was, he brought up, Wang and Jaspreet Singh brought up, well, then you're going to have to, what the risk of filing for bankruptcy, blah, blah, blah. They go through all those different factors, right? And the interesting part here is Raoul Paul was like, okay, yeah, you file for bankruptcy, it's terrible, but I'm still telling you, if you've got the cash flow and you're under the age of 35 and you're looking at Bitcoin or Ethereum, and you can just slowly put money into Bitcoin or Ethereum and you can hold it for 5 to 10 years. If in 5 to 10 years, it's up at $1 million, right? Guess what? If in 5 to 10 years, Bitcoin's up at $1 million, which is highly, highly likely because they went back over the adoption rate and all these companies and entities and institutions that are investing in Bitcoin and Ethereum, time's on your side. It's going to be 10x, 15x higher. You're going to be in a good situation, and you still have that cash flow. And they kept bringing up bankruptcy. And later on in the podcast, they talk about how people who file for bankruptcy genuinely do better than people who constantly try to avoid filing for bankruptcy. And the whole argument became, if you file for bankruptcy, you can actually get your feet under you quicker. And so it just came around full circle like an hour and a half later that like Raoul Paul's risky advice might hold some weight. And it's not something I think we should all be 100% doing. I think, they all covered the get rich quick shit that often is the problem, is that everybody's like in this get rich quick mode. And those people that have that ideology or that mode typically are also the people who don't have cash flow because they have a terrible job, or they quit their job, or they get into fights with people at their job because they're unstable and they hate their life. So, and they have that attitude. A lot of people will have that attitude of like they're constantly being shorted or slighted throughout life. That's like the get rich quick people. And so I think my whole takeaway from this is in the past, I've been a very big critic of Raoul Paul. I've actually even done videos on this channel where I've talked about how, yeah, he has a banana zone. And I feel like he's always missing the prediction. But honestly, when I listened to this entire podcast with Stephen Bartlett and what he was going through, I walked away from it going, okay, Raoul Paul believes you got to have cash flow, right? So you got to have income. Raoul Paul believes that you've got to play the long game. So you got to have a long-term perspective. He does like risk, okay? Invest in this, and it's going to be risky. But he also does talk about like setting up those investments so that you have something that you can get into technology or into the AI space as well as into crypto. So I wanted to share this as a very interesting take and a very interesting perspective. And I think if we have that long-term horizon and we have that cash flow and you're young, you have time on your side. If you're young, it's not as bad to take those crazy risks. I hope this helps somebody out there. I wanted to share that. And I'm going to go into Humphrey Wang and also into Jaspreet Singh. Until next time, peace.